You are the most important person in your life. So prioritize your health, your spirit, your comfort. Take good care of yourself. It's not selfish. The world keeps spinning as if nothing happened, but no one can keep you safe. So give yourself a little peace tonight through this story. If you've ever whispered, "I'm tired of being hurt," come sit next to me. Leave your comments below what finally stopped hurting. Like this video if you've overcome your old self. Subscribe for more silent revolutions like this. And now take a breath. Here we go. How to never be manipulated again. The day you realized it was control, not care. The story, Lara and the kindness that caged her. Lara sat across from me, her voice barely above a whisper. "He's always been so helpful," she said, eyes lowering. "He takes care of everything. My car, my job interviews, even how I dress." I nodded gently. "And how does that feel to you?" She hesitated. "Safe. At least it did." But lately, she trailed off. Her fingers twisted a tissue into something like a broken bird. "Lately, I feel small. I don't make decisions anymore. I ask him before doing anything, even texting a friend." That's when I offered what I've said to many others. Manipulation doesn't always come with a raised voice. Sometimes it arrives with flowers. Sometimes it opens doors, offers advice, picks up the check while quietly removing your ability to choose. Lara's partner didn't yell. He didn't insult her. He didn't forbid things. He simply helped with everything until Lara's world shrank to the size of his approval. He didn't say, "Don't wear that." He said, "That color doesn't suit you, babe." He didn't say, "Don't go out." He said, "I just get anxious when you're around those people. But hey, you're cool." He didn't say, "I control you." He said, "I just want what's best for us." And in those sugar-coated phrases, Lara disappeared. Manipulation disguised as care. This kind of manipulation is the most dangerous kind. Why? Because it feels like love. Not all control is loud. Manipulation is cruel. Sometimes it wears a smile. It comes disguised as protection, concern, even deep affection. Effective manipulation makes you feel grateful for being controlled. You think they're being considerate. In reality, they're slowly training you to outsource your decisions. You find yourself saying, "They're just trying to help," instead of asking, "Why don't I feel free?" There's a difference between support and surveillance, between care and control. Healthy love empowers you. Manipulation slowly makes you doubt yourself. A loving partner might offer feedback, but they don't punish you for disagreeing. They don't sulk when you say no. They don't withdraw affection if you act independently. But manipulators, they create a kind of invisible system where love feels conditional. Conditional on your obedience. Conditional on their comfort. Conditional on you staying small enough to manage. And here's the trap. Because they never scream, never threaten, never obviously hurt you, you blame yourself for feeling trapped. In many of my clients' lives, there's a moment, a quiet moment where something shifts. It doesn't always come with drama. Sometimes it's just a sentence that echoes the wrong way. Like Lara, you might be standing in your own kitchen holding a cup of tea when suddenly you realize, "I haven't made a real decision on my own in weeks." That moment is sacred. It's the soul's quiet rebellion, the whisper beneath the noise that says, "This isn't love, this is control." You don't need to be screamed at to be manipulated. Just need someone who's trained you to doubt your own voice. And the cruelest irony, you might thank them for it. Healing doesn't always look like a dramatic exit. Sometimes it's a series of small, brave choices. For Lara, it started with wearing an outfit she liked, even though he didn't. Then she set a boundary around his frequent check-ins every hour. Then she made plans with her friends, without asking. Each step felt terrifying. She kept thinking, "Am I being selfish? Is this wrong?" That's when I told her, "That's not guilt. That's your conditioning. You were taught that freedom equals danger. But slowly, her nervous system began to settle. She started hearing her own voice again. She began to remember who she was before his approval became her compass. If you're reading this and something inside you feels unsettled, if someone's face just popped into your mind, your body just tensed a little, pause. Ask yourself, do I feel free to make decisions without explanation? Do I feel like I can say no without punishment? Do I trust my own judgment? Or do I defer to someone else's comfort? If the answers sting, that's okay. That sting is truth stretching inside you. It means you're waking up. Because love that feels like restriction isn't love. It's obedience disguised in warmth. You deserve care that opens you up, not locks you down. You deserve support that strengthens your voice, not replaces it. You deserve to feel like yourself in love, not like a version edited for someone else's ease. Sometimes manipulation sounds like love because it whispers what you want to hear. Let that land. Ask yourself, do they make me feel safe or obedient? Do I feel deeply seen or merely managed? Is this connection rooted in freedom or fear of upsetting them? The difference between influence and invasion, the story. Daniel and the mentor who crossed the line. Daniel was bright, the kind of young entrepreneur who had a journal full of sketches, a calendar full of meetings, and a heart full of hope. He came to me not because something was obviously wrong, but because something fell off. I have this mentor, he began. He's a big deal in the industry. Helped me get my first funding, and I'm grateful truly. But always matters. But lately, I feel like I can't move without him. Every pitch I send, he edits. Every decision he questions. If I disagree, he'll remind me how much I owe him. He says he's just guiding me, but it feels more like steering. There was a long silence between us. Then I asked Daniel the one question that unlocks the truth in many situations. When you make a decision without his input, do you feel fear or freedom? His lips tightened, his eyes softened. Fear, he whispered. There is nothing wrong with seeking advice. There's nothing wrong with learning from those who walk the path before us. But a line between influence and invasion. Influence offers perspective. Invasion demands conformity. Influence sounds like, here's what worked for me. What do you think? Invasion sounds like, if you don't do it my way, you're screwing it up. One empowers, the other diminishes. One helps you refine your voice. The other teaches you to mute it. Just like in Daniel's case, mentors, parents, even friends can cross that line when they begin believing that your success must look like theirs. What makes this especially tricky is that invasion can look like intense caring. Someone who invades your choices might say, I'm just pushing you because I believe in you, when in truth, they're pushing because they don't trust your judgment. Why we don't notice the invasion sooner, sometimes we miss the signs, not because we're naive, but because we're hopeful. Hopeful that the guidance is genuine, that someone else sees our potential, that this pressure is just temporary. But here's the quiet reality. When someone consistently inserts themselves into your decisions, and your first reaction is to shrink, not expand, you're not being mentored, you're being managed. Daniel wasn't looking to rebel against wisdom. He was just trying to remember what it felt like to think on his own. And when you've relied on someone for validation long enough, even your intuition begins to ask permission. How Daniel took his space back, we didn't start with confrontation. That's never the first step in healing. We started with clarity. I asked him to journal for 1 week, write down every time he made a decision and whether it was based on his instincts or his mentor's opinions. By day 3, he had a quiet realization. Almost everything I've done this week has been pre-approved. Not aligned, not inspired, approved. He didn't feel like a founder anymore. He felt like an intern to someone else's dream. So we built small boundaries. He replied to his mentor's next critique with, "Thanks for your thoughts. I'll consider them and circle back." He made one decision without informing him just to see how it felt. At first terrifying, then liberating. The fear didn't vanish immediately, but what grew stronger was his self-trust. He realized that a good mentor doesn't want you dependent. They want you to outgrow them. Is there someone in your life whose opinion feels heavier than your own voice? Do you second-guess your instincts because you're afraid of disappointing them? Have you convinced yourself that being constantly corrected is the same as being deeply cared for? If so, take a breath. This doesn't mean the person in question is malicious, but intention doesn't cancel impact. Even well-meaning people can overstep. Loving voices can become loud enough to drown out your own. You are allowed to learn without being dominated, are allowed to admire someone's path without walking it step for step. Because in the end, the life you're building must fit you, not the blueprint someone else handed you. The key distinction: power versus permission. Here's a tool I give to clients. Before taking advice, ask yourself, is this person empowering me to decide or asking me to comply? After talking to them, do I feel expanded, masuju, or edited? Do they trust my pace, or do they rush my growth? When someone influences you, you feel more yourself. Someone invades you, you feel like you're being slowly erased. And that's the difference. Not in tone, not in title, but in how you feel afterward. The line between guidance and control is drawn by your ability to say no. Let that settle. Some might say, but if they're more experienced, shouldn't I trust them? Others might argue, isn't pushing someone part of mentorship? Here's the question that matters more. Can you say no to them without being punished directly or indirectly? If not, it's no longer mentorship, it's management. And your soul was not built for management, it was built for evolution. Manipulators study your needs, not your strength. The story. Ava and the illusion of being chosen. Ava's eyes sparkled when she first told me about him. He sees me, she said. Not just the way I look, but all the messy stuff. My insecurities, my family issues, my anxiety about being left behind. And somehow he doesn't run. It sounded magical, until it wasn't. 3 months later, she came back quieter. He knows exactly what to say, she said, voice thin. When I try to take space, he says, I'm abandoning him. When I get anxious, he brings up things I told him in confidence to prove I'm too emotional. I feel trapped. What she thought was connection had become control. What she thought was being seen had become being studied. That's when I offered her a truth many don't realize until it's too late. Manipulators don't study your strength. They study your need. They don't fall in love with the whole of you. They zero in on the gap and position themselves as the one who can fill it. Everyone has a hunger. To be loved, to be chosen, to be understood, to be forgiven, to finally feel enough. There's nothing wrong with that hunger. It's deeply human. But manipulators, they don't respond to your hunger with nourishment. They respond with control. If you crave validation, they flood you with praise until you crave them for it. If you fear abandonment, they make themselves indispensable, then threaten withdrawal. If you long for peace, they give it just enough to keep you guessing when it disappears. It's not that they admire your strengths. It's that they see your emptiness and offer to fill it on their terms. They don't say you're powerful. They say, without me, you'd fall apart. And at first it sounds like devotion. Later you realize it was surveillance. The flattery trap. Why feeling chosen can be dangerous. Ava once told me, he chose me when I was at my lowest. That has to mean something. I looked at her softly. It means he saw someone with unmet needs. And instead of helping you rise, he learned how to keep you dependent. This isn't always done maliciously. Sometimes manipulators don't even realize they're doing it. They need to be needed. So they find someone who's struggling, then wrap themselves around that wound like a bandage with a lock. You begin to associate their presence with safety, their attention with worth, their approval with identity. So when they pull back, it doesn't feel like space. It feels like death. We didn't start with blame. We started with awareness. She made a list not of his behaviors, but of how she felt after interactions. I feel calm, then confused. I feel loved, then guilty. I feel seen but not accepted. Then we circled each moment where he used her vulnerabilities against her, bringing up her past in arguments, calling her too sensitive when she asked for respect, reminding her how much he's done for her. It became clear this wasn't a relationship. It was a dependency trap. So we shifted focus, not on fixing him, but on feeding her hunger herself. She practiced giving herself the things he once monopolized, her own voice of reassurance, her own presence when anxious, her own care during loneliness. And day by day the tether loosened, not because he changed, but because she no longer needed his version of love to survive. Ask yourself gently, what do I most long to hear? Where am I most afraid of being left? Who in my life knows this and how do they treat it? The people who love you well will never turn your soft places into control points. They don't guard your wounds to own you. They guard them because they want to see you whole. But those who manipulate, they won't admire your healing. They'll fear it, because the stronger you become, the less you'll need them. It's easy to assume that someone who sees you is your soulmate, but not everyone who sees your pain wants to help you heal. Some just want to stay relevant in your suffering. If someone truly loves you, your healing will not scare them. It will set them free too. Quote to reflect and debate. Manipulators don't mirror your soul. They mimic your emptiness. Sit with that for a moment. Who have you allowed to stay because they felt familiar? Was it love? Or just someone playing the perfect part to match your needs? Some will say, but he knows me better than anyone. Others might argue, isn't it natural to bond over pain? Here's what matters. Do you grow around them or shrink more every time you need them? True connection doesn't make you more dependent. It makes you more yourself. The lie of the guilt trap. The story. Julia and the friendship that was never equal. Julia came to me exhausted, not physically, emotionally, soul tired. I can't do it anymore. Every time I don't pick up the phone, she sends these messages like I'm abandoning her. And when I try to explain, I feel like the villain. I've been bending for years, and I don't know who I am anymore when I'm not rescuing her. Her best friend of 7 years, Rachel, was always in some kind of crisis. A breakup, a fight with her boss, a late-night existential spiral. And Julia, ever the caregiver, was always there, always answering, always helping. But lately, she began to realize it was never mutual. When Julia needed support, Rachel disappeared. When Julia said no, Rachel made her feel like a monster. That's when I gently offered this. You're not selfish. You've just been trained to believe that saying no makes you bad. Guilt is not proof of wrongdoing. Here's the truth. Manipulators don't want you to know. Guilt is not always your conscience. Sometimes it's conditioning. We often confuse guilt with morality. If I feel bad, I must have done something wrong. But that's not always the case. Sometimes you feel guilty simply because you've disrupted a dynamic that benefited someone else more than you, especially if you're an empath, a helper, a peacekeeper. You've likely been praised your whole life for being so kind, so loyal, so reliable. The guilt hits like a wave, not because you're wrong, but because you're used to abandoning yourself in the name of keeping the peace. Manipulators know this. They don't need to yell or threaten. They just need to activate your guilt. A sigh, a passive-aggressive comment, a sad emoji, and suddenly you're back in line. The unspoken contract. Julia, like many of us, was living inside an unspoken contract. A belief that went like this: if I'm not always available, I'm not lovable. If I say no, I'll lose the connection. If I choose myself, I'm selfish. These beliefs didn't come from nowhere. They often come from early life where love was conditional or boundaries were punished. So when someone in adulthood replicates that pattern, it feels familiar, almost safe. But it's not safety. It's self-abandonment wearing a smile. Julia wasn't the villain. She was just finally refusing to play the role she never auditioned for. How Julia freed herself from the guilt trap. We didn't start with confrontation. We started with permission. I told her, "You are allowed to not be available. You are allowed to rest. You are allowed to say no. You are allowed to disappoint people who benefit from your exhaustion." She cried when I said that. Not because it was new, but because it felt like someone had finally opened the door to a room she wasn't allowed to enter. Then we practiced tiny no's. "I'm not the right person for this. I need space this week." And yes, Rachel pushed back. Hard. Accused her of being cold, distant, changed. But Julia stayed firm, not cruel, just clear. With every boundary, the guilt returned. But this time, she didn't take it as a sign she was wrong. She took it as a sign that her healing had finally begun. When you say no, do you feel like you owe a detailed explanation? Do you often say yes just to avoid making someone upset? Has anyone in your life used phrases like, "After everything I've done for you," or "I guess you don't care anymore"? If so, you're not broken. You're likely just caught in the guilt trap. Remember this: saying no is not mean. Resting is not selfish. Boundaries are not betrayal. Your worth is not measured by how much you endure. A truth that hurts, then heals. Sometimes the people who call you selfish are the ones who are benefiting from your lack of boundaries. Sometimes the guilt you feel isn't a sign that you failed them, but that you've finally stopped failing yourself. And that is worth celebrating. Quote, to reflect and debate, you are not selfish for wanting mutual respect. Let that sit with you. You might hear, but friendship is about being there for each other. Yes, but not as a one-way street. But they're going through so much. Sure. And so are you. Who's there for you? The real question isn't, do I care? It's, is this care returned or only expected? Because love without reciprocity isn't love. It's labor. And you, my friend, were never born just to carry others. You deserve to be held too. Emotional debt. You don't owe anyone for being kind. The story. Evan and the uncle who bought his silence. Evan was one of those people who rarely asked for help. He paid his bills early, offered to drive others home, and always texted you good even when he wasn't. But when he walked into my office, I could see it. The weight he carried wasn't physical, it was inherited. And it lived inside a story he never questioned until now. "My uncle paid for my college tuition," he said. "No strings attached," or so I thought. But now, every time I disagree with him, he reminds me. He says things like, "You'd be nowhere without me," or "Just remember who gave you that start." Now he wants me to join his company. I don't want to, but if I say no, he trailed off. His shoulders fell. I'll feel ungrateful, like I'm spitting in the face of his generosity. That's when I offered the truth. Kindness when leveraged for control is not kindness, it's currency. We live in a world where we're taught to never forget who helped you, and there's value in that. Gratitude is grounding, humbling, healing. But there's a dark mirror of gratitude, emotional debt. Emotional debt is when someone offers help, not as a gift, but as an investment. Not with love, but with expectation. And that expectation might not show up right away. It waits, lurks. Then when you begin to act independently, it appears in subtle threats, guilt-laced reminders, or unspoken pressure to comply. Emotional debt says you can live your life as long as it still benefits me. The currency of manipulators, favors that bind manipulators, rarely control you through obvious force. They control you through favors. They remember your birthday. They paid your rent once. They gave you advice when no one else did. And because you're a decent human being, you remember. You care. You feel a sense of obligation. But slowly that gratitude turns into permission for them to interfere, judge, demand, or direct your life. What you thought was a gift becomes a contract. And the scariest part, you signed it without realizing How Evan broke the contract. We started by separating the act from the attachment. I asked Evan, if your uncle had helped you without reminding you, would you still be grateful? He said yes. Then the gratitude is real, I told him. But the guilt, that's manufactured. We created a new definition of respect, not one that means obeying, not one that means debt, but one that means truth. He wrote his uncle a letter, never sent it, but it helped. I'm thankful for what you gave, but I no longer accept the strings attached. I am not a product of your investment. I am a person, and your generosity doesn't give you authorship over my life. Evan didn't confront his uncle loudly. He simply stopped shrinking when guilt showed up. He chose his own path quietly but clearly, and for the first time he felt free. Ask yourself honestly, take a moment to reflect. Is there someone in your life who reminds you of what they've done for you just when you're about to choose something for yourself? Have you ever stayed silent out of respect that felt more like fear? Have you felt like kindness was a loan, not a gift? If so, you're not ungrateful. You're waking up. Kindness with strings isn't love. It's control in polite clothing. What real kindness looks like. Real kindness doesn't ask for a return. It says, I'm doing this because I can and because I want to, not because I expect repayment. It doesn't follow up 6 months later with, remember what I did for you. It doesn't attach itself to your decisions, your relationships, or your career path. And most importantly, real kindness empowers your autonomy. It doesn't purchase your silence. You can be grateful and still say no. This is where many people get stuck. We think, if I set a boundary, I'm being disrespectful. If I walk away, I'm erasing the good they did. If I speak my truth, I'm being ungrateful. Here's the truth. You can hold both. You can honor the kindness someone once gave and still refuse the control they try to exert now. Gratitude doesn't mean submission. Respect doesn't mean obedience. And love doesn't mean losing yourself. If the favor comes with a leash, it was never a gift. That might sting. Some will say, but they meant well. Others may argue, you owe people loyalty. But here's the deeper question. What kind of loyalty are you offering? One born of love or one born of fear? Because the first will grow you and the second will suffocate you. The silence that says more than words. The story, Nina, and the punishment that had no sound. Nina came to me in the middle of a long pause in her relationship. Not a breakup, not a fight, just silence. He doesn't yell, she said. He just goes quiet for hours, sometimes days. I asked, does he tell you why? She shook her head. If I bring up something that hurts me, or if I disagree, he just shuts down. No messages, no calls. I'll sit there wondering if I've pushed too far, if I'm too much, if I should apologize just to break the silence. Her hands trembled as she said it, not from fear of him, from fear of that echoing absence. What Nina was experiencing wasn't distance, it wasn't introversion, it was emotional withdrawal used as control. And I gently told her, silence can be sacred, but when used to punish it becomes a weapon. Silence on its own is not cruel. It can be healing, reflective, even loving. But like all things, it's not what it is, it's how it's used. In healthy relationships, silence is mutual. It's space, room to breathe, time to think. It's two people knowing we can be quiet and still connected. But in manipulative dynamics, silence becomes a lever, a form of withdrawal, a quiet punishment for speaking your truth. You're not yelled at, you're not insulted, you're simply ignored. And the most dangerous part, you begin to blame yourself. How the silent treatment conditions you. Here's how it happens. You bring up a concern, a need, a boundary. Instead of engaging, they retreat emotionally or physically. You sit in uncertainty, waiting, replaying everything. Eventually, you reach out. You apologize, even if you didn't do anything wrong. They respond, act normal again, as if nothing happened. Over time, your brain learns a dangerous lesson. If I speak my truth, I lose connection. So next time, you stay quiet. And just like that, they've trained you without ever raising their voice. I asked Nina one question. Does his silence feel like peace or power? Her face changed. She whispered, power. Always. That was the truth she needed. We worked together on one key shift. To stop interpreting his silence as her fault and start seeing it as a tactic. She wrote down the times it happened, what triggered it, how long it lasted, how it made her feel. A pattern emerged. It always followed moments when she asked for more honesty, more clarity, more respect. And his silence wasn't absence, it was punishment. So she made a change. The next time he went quiet, she didn't chase. She didn't text. She didn't apologize. She didn't fold. And after 2 days of silence, he reached out with his usual charm. Hey, just been busy. What's up? She replied simply, I am not available for relationships where communication feels like punishment. That was the last time he used silence to control her. What to ask yourself? If you're in a situation where silence is part of the pattern, pause and ask, do I fear the silence or do I feel safe in it? Does their silence follow my truth? Am I constantly reaching out just to feel okay again? Because in healthy love, silence can feel like a warm room. But in manipulation, it feels like a locked door and you're left knocking. When silence is emotional withholding is when someone intentionally pulls back connection, affection, or responsiveness, not to reflect or recharge, but to control. They may ignore messages, respond with one-word answers, say I'm fine when they clearly aren't, shut down completely until you give in. And the longer you chase, the more power they feel. This isn't emotional maturity, it's emotional manipulation. You don't have to break the silence. First, you were not put on this earth to beg for clarity, to chase someone's attention like a child lost in a supermarket. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is not respond, not explain, not rescue the silence with your effort. Let the silence reveal them, because someone who truly cares won't use distance as discipline. Silence isn't always golden. Sometimes it's a leash with no words. Some will say, but maybe they just need space. Yes, everyone needs space, but space is communicated, not weaponized. Others will argue, isn't it better than yelling? Perhaps, but silence that wounds you is no less harmful than words that bruise. Here's the better question. Does their silence create safety or control? If it's the latter, you're not overreacting. You're waking up. Love that feeds on your confusion. The story. Marcus and the maze of mixed messages. Marcus used to be confident, grounded. He built things with his hands, spoke with clarity, and rarely doubted his own gut. But when he sat down in front of me, he looked like a man slowly dissolving. I don't know anymore, he said. One moment, she says I'm everything she's ever wanted. The next, she disappears for days. When I bring it up, she says I'm being clingy. But then she texts me at 2 a.m., saying she misses me. He stared at the floor. I'm exhausted, not from the relationship, from trying to figure out what's real. This is how confusion enters, not like a storm, but like fog, soft, unthreatening. But soon you can't find your way out. And that's when I told him, some people don't love you, they love your uncertainty. Because when you're confused, you're easier to control. In healthy relationships, clarity is a gift. You know where you stand. Even when things are hard, the lines are clear. You feel steady even when emotions are strong. But in manipulative relationships, you get a strange cocktail of affection and rejection, praise then coldness, warmth then withdrawal. They hold you, then blame you. They say, I love you, and in the same breath, but you're too much. And your brain, wired for connection, starts spinning. Maybe I am too sensitive. Maybe I just misunderstood. Maybe it's me. That's the trap. You begin to explain away the inconsistency. You try harder. You make excuses for them. You abandon your own clarity to keep the peace. But here's the truth. Love should bring stillness to your mind, not chaos to your thoughts. Why confusion is so effective? Confusion is one of the most underestimated tools of manipulation. It doesn't look violent. It doesn't even look cruel. In fact, it often comes with a smile. The manipulator knows if you're constantly guessing how they feel or where you stand, you'll work harder to win their approval. You'll be too busy decoding their signals to notice that they never answer clearly. Too tangled in overthinking to realize they're enjoying the control. And once you're hooked on their maybe, they never have to give you a yes or a no. They just have to keep you guessing. I gave Marcus a strange assignment. For 1 week, write down what she says and what she does. By day 4, he came back with a quiet realization. She says she cares, but she never follows through. She says I'm important, but cancels plans. She says I'm safe, but disappears when I need her most. That contrast is where clarity lives. Not in what they promise, but in what they practice. We then named what was happening intermittent reinforcement, a pattern of unpredictable reward and punishment. The same psychological loop used in casinos. You keep pulling the lever, not because you always win, but because you sometimes do. That's what his relationship had become. A slot machine of affection. Sometimes he'd win a night of closeness. Other times he'd get nothing. But that maybe kept him addicted. Once he saw the cycle, he stepped off it. He stopped asking, "Does she love me?" and started asking, "Why do I feel so unsafe when I do?" That one question changed everything. Now I invite you to pause and ask yourself, am I constantly second-guessing what someone means? Do I feel like I have to read between the lines just to understand them? Do I feel stable in this connection, or just hopeful? Because confusion in a relationship isn't always your fault. Sometimes it's the design, and your job isn't to decode the puzzle. It's to realize that real love doesn't make you feel like a riddle to be solved. What love should actually feel like. Love isn't always perfect, but it should be consistent. Not perfect communication, but clear intention. Not endless harmony, but mutual repair. Not always knowing the future, but feeling safe in the present. If someone truly loves you, you won't have to chase their words with anxiety. You won't need to replay every conversation in your head. You won't feel punished for being curious, expressive, or honest. Because love is not supposed to feel like a test you keep failing. If you're always confused around someone, that's the clarity. Sit with that. Some might say, but they're just complicated. But maybe I'm too sensitive. But I've never felt this kind of passion before. All of that might be true. But here's a deeper truth. Love should expand your understanding, not twist your mind into knots. The mask of urgency. When time pressure is a trap. The story, Chris and the deal that couldn't wait. Chris was a talented designer, fresh out of a toxic job, and finally ready to start something of his own. When he came to see me, he looked both excited and unsettled. "I've been offered a partnership," he said. "A former mentor wants to invest in my idea. But there's a catch. He says if I don't sign the agreement by Friday, the deal is off." It was Wednesday, I asked. "And how does that feel in your body?" He exhaled, shaky, tight, pressured, like I'll lose something big if I don't act now. That's when I said it, the sentence no one had ever offered him. Anything truly meant for you will not require panic to accept it. Urgency in itself isn't bad. Life has deadlines, decisions, moments that require boldness. But manipulative urgency feels different. It's not about momentum, it's about pressure. It's not about opportunity, it's about obedience. When someone says, "If you don't decide now, I'll walk away," other people would kill for this. Don't overthink it. You'll regret missing out. What they're really saying is, "I don't want you to think. I want you to submit." When you rush, you're easier to persuade. When you're anxious, you don't ask deep questions. When you're on the clock, your intuition gets silenced by fear. Why urgency works so well. Manipulators rely on urgency because it hijacks your nervous system. It activates the fight or flight response. Suddenly, the decision feels like life or death. You think, what if I lose my one shot? What if they take this offer away and I never get another? What if they think I'm difficult? And so, under pressure, you say yes. You move in, you sign the paper, you say I love you too before you're ready. You agree to terms that weren't yours. Not because you're weak, but because you were rushed out of your wisdom. We started with a body check-in. I asked him, close your eyes. Think about saying yes. How does that feel in your chest? Now think about saying, I need more time. What shifts? He noticed something he hadn't allowed himself to name. The offer didn't feel exciting. It felt cornered. We reframed the situation. If someone threatens to pull support simply because you need 48 more hours, was it ever real support? Chris wrote a clear, grounded message. Thanks for the offer. I'm honored by your interest. I need the weekend to review it fully. If it's still on the table by Monday, I'll follow up. The reply came fast. You clearly don't understand how opportunities work. I'm out. And just like that, Chris saw the truth. It wasn't an offer. It was a test of compliance. He didn't fail it. He passed. Here's how to tell the difference between real urgency and manipulative pressure. Question: if the answer is yes, does the offer come with threats? It's pressure. Are you discouraged from thinking or consulting others? It's control. Do you feel tense in your body when making the decision? Step back. Is there space to ask questions or push back on terms? If not, it's a trap. In healthy relationships and business deals, respect creates space. People who value you won't mind you taking time. They won't punish your thoughtfulness. You're allowed to ask for time. You don't need to justify needing time. You don't need to apologize for thinking deeply. You don't need to feel bad for not rushing. Your clarity is more valuable than their deadline. And here's something most manipulators don't expect. When you pause, they lose control, because their entire strategy depends on your speed, not your strength. If it can't wait, it probably shouldn't stay. This quote invites tension. Some may say, but some moments really are now or never. Sure, but even then, clarity matters more than urgency. Others might argue, sometimes you just have to leap, and that's true. But the leap should come from alignment, not anxiety. Here's the better question. Is this urgency helping you choose, or just helping them win? When manipulators weaponize your empathy, the story, Talia, and the friend who always needed saving. Talia was known for her kindness. She volunteered at shelters, took care of her aging parents, stayed late at work to cover for co-workers. And with her friends, she was the one who listened. But when she sat in front of me, one quiet afternoon, there was a deep exhaustion behind her smile. I'm always the one fixing things, she said, especially with Maren. Maren was her best friend, someone who always seemed to be in the middle of a crisis. She's either crying about her breakup, her family, her job. And when I try to set boundaries, she tells me I'm her only support. That if I leave, she doesn't know what she'll do. Talia paused. I love her, but lately it feels like I'm being emotionally blackmailed. That's when I told her gently, empathy is beautiful, but without boundaries it becomes a leash. Empathy is one of the most powerful gifts we can offer. To truly feel someone else's pain, to sit with them in their storm, is sacred. But some people don't want healing. They want attention. They want a constant stream of emotional rescue. And they've learned that your empathy is the fastest way to get it. This isn't always conscious. They may not be trying to harm you intentionally, but that doesn't mean it's harmless. How manipulators use empathy as a tool. Here's how it works. They position themselves as the victim always. They share just enough pain to activate your compassion. When you set a boundary, they respond with guilt. I thought you cared. No one else understands me. I guess I was wrong to trust you. And before you know it, you're back in the role of savior. But here's the secret. They don't want solutions. They want your energy. They want someone who will always be available no matter how much it costs you. The inner conflict of the empath. Talia struggled with what many empaths do. The belief that saying no is the same as abandoning someone. And that belief makes it very easy to manipulate you. Because when someone knows you can't handle seeing them in pain, they can use that pain to control you. But empathy without limits isn't noble. It's dangerous to you and eventually to them. Because when you keep rescuing someone who refuses to grow, you're not helping them heal. You're helping them stay stuck. How Talia found her line. We started with a radical truth. Just because someone is hurting doesn't mean they're entitled to you. I had her write 2 columns. In the first, what she gave Maren time, emotional energy, late night calls. In the second, what Maren gave back. The list wasn't balanced. Then I asked, would Maren still be in your life if you stopped rescuing her? Talia paused, then whispered no. That was the shift. She realized it wasn't friendship. It was dependency. And her empathy had become a form of emotional currency traded for temporary peace. So we practiced new phrases. I care, but I'm not available tonight. That sounds really tough. Have you considered seeing a therapist? I trust that you'll find your way through this, even without me fixing it. Maren didn't take it well. She called her distant cold, not like she used to be. But for the first time, Talia didn't apologize for protecting her peace. And soothe. And slowly her life began to breathe again. If you're someone who leads with empathy, ask gently, do people only come to me when they need something? Do I feel drained after most conversations? Do I feel like I'm allowed to have boundaries or just expected to be nice? Have I confused helping with healing? And most importantly, do I feel guilty when I put myself first? If so, it might be time to stop asking, how do I keep showing up for them? And start asking, why do they never show up for me? Real empathy is not sacrificing yourself to carry others. It's being present without becoming their emotional oxygen tank. You can care deeply and still say no. You can be kind and still walk away. You can feel their pain and still honor your capacity. That's not cold, that's wise. Because when you give past your limits, you're not loving, you're leaking. Empathy without protection becomes self-erasure. This one stirs people, some might say. But isn't that what love is giving without expecting anything back? And yes, love is generous, but it is also mutual, respectful, reciprocal. Others might argue, some people don't have anyone else. That may be true, but you are not the solution to everyone's story. You are a human being worthy of rest, boundaries, and peace. So the real question is, are you helping them grow or just keeping them afloat while you drown? The manipulator's favorite word, ungrateful. The story, Mira, and the invisible price of support. Mira sat across from me, wringing her hands as if she were trying to scrub off a guilt that wouldn't budge. I know I shouldn't feel bad, she said, but I do. Every time I speak up, every time I draw a line, he says the same thing. What does he say? I asked. She didn't hesitate. After everything I've done for you, this is how you treat me. The phrase echoed in her chest. She had heard it from her boyfriend, her older brother, even her former boss. Every time she tried to assert herself, even with kindness, she was met with one weaponized word, ungrateful. And like many empaths, she believed them. Not because it was true, but because it felt true. That's when I told her, gratitude is not compliance, and kindness is not a contract. Gratitude is beautiful when it's alive, when it flows freely from the heart, when it's given, not demanded. But manipulators don't want gratitude. They want obedience disguised as appreciation. They help you move, buy you dinner, comfort you during a rough time, and in return, they expect loyalty, silence, agreement, submission. If you express disagreement, you're ungrateful. If you set a boundary, you're disrespectful. If you walk away, you're ungrateful. and disloyal. And that's the trick. They don't have to prove you did anything wrong. They just have to convince you that you're indebted. Why the word ungrateful hurts so much. Being called ungrateful strikes a very specific nerve, especially if you were raised to be good. Good daughter, good son, good friend. Gratitude in those systems often means don't speak up, don't question, don't forget who helped you. So when someone throws that word at you, it reactivates old wounds. You start to think, maybe I am selfish, maybe I do owe them more, maybe I should just let this go. But that guilt isn't clarity, it's conditioning. How Mira unlearned the debt. We began by making a list. On one side, everything she was told she owed. On the other, everything she actually consented to. What became clear, most of the favors she received were not requests. They were imposed with the expectation that she'd comply forever in return. We reframed her understanding of generosity. True gifts don't come with IOUs. True love doesn't require silence. True care doesn't fear your no. Mira began to practice a simple but radical sentence. I'm grateful for what you've done, and I still have the right to choose differently. And when the word ungrateful came up again, this time from her brother, when she declined to help with a family issue, she didn't apologize. She simply replied, gratitude is not ownership. That was the day her guilt cracked open and something stronger emerged in its place. If the word ungrateful has ever been used against you, ask, who benefits when I feel this guilt? What decision would I make if I didn't feel like I owed someone? Am I being accused of ingratitude simply for choosing my own boundaries? Because here's the truth. Gratitude is never a valid excuse to stay small, or silent, or stuck. When someone weaponizes what they gave you, it might sound like, I dropped everything for you. I was there when no one else was. You wouldn't be where you are without me. All of those things may be factually true, but facts without compassion become control. You're allowed to say, yes, you helped me, and I'm still allowed to grow in my own direction. That doesn't make you ungrateful. It makes you sovereign. What real gratitude looks like. Real gratitude is free. It's expressed naturally, not forced. It sounds like I appreciate what you did for me. I won't forget your kindness. I learnt a lot from that experience. But real gratitude does not sound like, so I'll never say no to you again. So I'll stay in this dynamic even when it hurts. So I owe you my silence. You don't owe anyone eternal access to you, no matter how much they've helped. You don't owe your silence to the person who bought it with favors. Let that land. Some may say, but loyalty matters. Yes, but not if it comes at the cost of your well-being. Others might argue, you shouldn't bite the hand that fed you. That's true, but asking for basic respect isn't biting, it's boundary setting. So here's the real question. Are they calling you ungrateful because you're unkind or because you stopped obeying? You don't need to explain your boundaries. The story, Leo, and the endless justifications. Leo was a kind soul, the kind who ended every message with a smiley face even when he was setting a boundary. I told my friend I couldn't meet this weekend, he said during our session. I've been overwhelmed with work and needed to rest. But when she pushed back, I panicked. I started explaining everything. I told her about my deadlines, my headaches, my sleep schedule. He looked at me with frustration toward himself. She still made me feel bad, said I was distant, said I've changed. And now, I'm wondering if I was too cold. I nodded slowly, then offered this. A boundary explained too much becomes a debate. And your peace isn't a courtroom. Here's the truth. Most of us were never taught. You don't have to justify your no. You don't need bullet points. You don't need a backstory. You don't need to hand someone your calendar as proof that your time matters. Boundaries are not up for negotiation. They are a statement of your capacity, not an invitation for judgment. But manipulators, they're experts at turning your clarity into a trial. They don't say, I respect that. They say, why can't you make time? They don't hear your no. They demand your explanation so they can poke holes in it. That's how the manipulation works. Not by forbidding you from setting boundaries, but by exhausting you until you stop trying. Why we feel compelled to explain people pleasers, empaths, and those raised in environments where their needs were often dismissed are especially vulnerable to this dynamic. You were taught that being nice means always being available, that no without a smile is rude, that your reasons must be valid in the eyes of others. So when someone questions you, your nervous system lights up. You scramble to prove that you're not selfish. You turn your rest into a research paper, hoping they'll understand. But here's the thing, you're not on trial. Your life doesn't require their approval. How Leo learned to hold the line. We started small. He practiced saying, "I'm not available this week. That doesn't work for me. I need rest," and I'm honoring that. No essays, no apologies, no long disclaimers. The first few times his body rebelled, he'd hear the inner voice, "You're being rude. They'll think you don't care." But with time, he noticed something important. The people who respected his boundary never needed an explanation, and the ones who pushed back wouldn't have accepted any reason anyway. That's when it clicked. The right people adjust to your limits. The wrong ones are offended by your autonomy. Ask yourself gently, do you feel anxious when someone asks, "Why not?" Do you over-explain your boundaries to avoid disappointing people? Do you find yourself apologizing for simply needing space-time or silence? If yes, let this truth sink in. Needing something isn't selfish. Choosing peace isn't cruel. Protecting your energy isn't an attack on someone else. You are allowed to say no, and let the silence that follows be your full sentence. What a boundary is and isn't. A boundary is a line drawn to honor your capacity, a form of self-respect, a declaration of emotional safety. A boundary is not a rejection of love, an insult, a debate. When you explain your boundary too much, you invite people to vote on it. And if you've been around manipulators long enough, you already know they'll always vote against your well-being. Letting the silence do the work. Sometimes the most powerful moment isn't what you say, it's what you don't say. You don't respond to the guilt trip. You don't answer the why when it's laced with entitlement. You don't apologize for protecting your peace. Instead, you stay still, not cold, just clear. Because nothing confuses a manipulator more than someone who won't explain their healing. A boundary explained 10 times is no longer a boundary. It's a debate. Some may argue, but communication is important, absolutely. But explaining is not the same as communicating. Others might say, but people deserve to know why. That depends. Are they genuinely curious or looking for ways to override your choice? Here's a better filter. If someone only respects your boundary after you convince them they don't respect you, they respect control. When peace feels boring, you've been addicted to drama. The story, Alia and the man who didn't yell Salia, had left a toxic relationship 6 months before she came to see me. Her ex was unpredictable, loving one day, cold the next. He'd pick fights out of nowhere, disappear after arguments, and return with grand gestures. He made me feel alive, she said, but also constantly anxious. Now she was dating someone new, calm, kind, steady, and she was bored. "I know this guy is good for me," she said. "He listens, he's gentle, but sometimes I just miss the spark." I asked her softly, was it a spark or a fire alarm? She blinked. Then I told her what many survivors of manipulation need to hear. If peace feels boring, it's not because it lacks love. It's because your nervous system is still addicted to chaos. People who've spent years in dysfunctional dynamics often confuse stillness with emptiness. You don't trust calm. You mistake kindness for dullness. You interpret emotional safety as a lack of chemistry because your body was trained to equate love with emotional roller coasters. The rush of making up after a fight, chasing validation, decoding their mood swings, walking on eggshells, then getting crumbs of praise. That high is powerful. It becomes a cycle like any addiction. Your nervous system begins to crave the tension, the uncertainty, the adrenaline. And when you finally find something gentle, it feels unfamiliar, even uncomfortable. So you call it boring, but it's not boring. It's healthy. Alia's pattern. Mistaking intensity for intimacy, we mapped out her emotional history. It wasn't just this one ex. She had grown up in a home where love was inconsistent, where attention had to be earned. So of course chaos felt familiar. Her body remembered it. Her mind normalized it. And now when someone treated her gently, she questioned it. We reframed the pattern. Intensity is not intimacy. Drama is not depth. Confusion is not connection. She realized that the spark she missed was really just the adrenaline of instability. It wasn't love. It was survival mode. Healing for Alia didn't mean forcing herself to love peaceful relationships. It meant retraining her body to feel safe with calm. She practiced grounding when things felt too quiet. She noticed how her breathing shifted when someone didn't yell. She journaled when her mind told her, "This is too easy, it must be fake." And slowly, her system began to recognize peace, not as boredom, but as belonging. She learned that love doesn't have to be earned. It can simply be received. And one day she told me, "For the first time, I don't feel like I'm auditioning for affection." Ask yourself tenderly, do you feel anxious when a relationship feels too calm? Do you start conflicts just to feel something? Do you believe that unless it hurts, it's not real? If so, there's nothing wrong with you. But there may be something old in you that believes love must be chaotic. That part of you doesn't need to be shamed. It needs to be held, reparented, shown that safety is not a trap, it's a home. Why manipulators create drama? Because it works. Drama hijacks your attention. It keeps you in a reactive state. It creates emotional dependency. Manipulators know that when you're overwhelmed, you're easier to control. And when things settle, they'll stir the pot again, just enough to keep you on edge. So if calm feels threatening to you, that's not your intuition. That's your trauma being loud. What real love feels like. It doesn't drain you. It doesn't confuse you. It doesn't punish you with silence or lash out to get your attention. Real love feels like a steady pulse, not a racing heart, a clear path, not a maze, a deep breath, not shallow panic. It may not thrill your nervous system at first, but it will heal it. And one day you'll realize you didn't need the chaos. You just needed to feel safe enough to stop craving it. When your nervous system doesn't recognize peace, manipulation feels like home. Some will say, "But I like passion." Yes, and healthy love can be passionate, but there's a difference between passion and patterned pain. Others might argue, "But some drama makes it exciting." That may be true, but ask yourself, is it excitement or emotional whiplash? Because what you call chemistry might just be the echo of chaos. A final note to you, the reader. You've made it through 12 parts. You've questioned old stories. You've examined your pain. You've looked into dark corners with new light. And now you know what manipulation looks like. And more importantly, what it doesn't. You are allowed to be boring in the best way. Choose peace without apology. Rest without guilt. Say no without explaining. Love without auditioning. Because real love doesn't need to be earned through suffering. It meets you where you are and whispers, "You were already enough." You've walked through 12 rooms of truth, and each room held something different. A story, a wound, a pattern you once thought was love until you saw it wasn't. Maybe you entered this journey because something in your life didn't feel quite right. You couldn't name it, but you could feel it. The silent guilt, the subtle control, the voice in your head that second-guessed every no you tried to speak out loud. You came here not just to escape manipulation, but to remember something far deeper, that your voice is sacred, that your needs are valid, and that love should never cost you yourself. You've unlearned the lies. Let's name a few of them again, just so they lose their grip. You are not ungrateful for choosing peace. You are not selfish for needing rest. You are not cold for drawing a line. You are not dramatic for asking for clarity. You are not disloyal for growing beyond someone's expectations. You were simply taught to abandon yourself so others would stay comfortable. And now you're unlearning that. What you've built instead. Throughout these 12 chapters, you haven't just rejected manipulation, you've rebuilt something much more powerful. Self-trust, the quiet knowing that you can choose for yourself without asking permission. Emotional clarity, the ability to feel the difference between real love and obligation disguised as loyalty. Inner safety, the deep, steady truth that you no longer need chaos to feel alive. Boundaries that breathe not as walls to shut people out, but as doors that open inward toward you. You've stepped out of the noise and into the space where your own voice can finally echo without fear. What healing actually looks like. It's not always clean, not always brave. Sometimes it's cancelling a call and sitting with the guilt without giving in. Sometimes it's saying no and shaking for an hour afterward. Sometimes it's missing someone who hurt you and still not going back. Healing is subtle, quiet, often lonely, but over time, it becomes the most loyal friend you've ever had. Because it's not trying to change you, it's simply trying to return you to you. People who love you won't need you to shrink in order to stay. Silence can be holy, but not when it's used to control. Not every helper is a healer. Not every favor is a gift. Not every spark is a sign. It might be a signal of past pain, looking for a pattern. And above all else, you don't owe anyone your exhaustion just to prove your worth. If you ever forget, you will. We all do. You'll slip. You'll over-explain again. You'll silence yourself in a conversation that feels too familiar. You'll mistake chaos for chemistry. You'll feel guilty after saying no. When that happens, don't start over. Just pause. Remember this. You have already woken up, and you cannot unknow what you now see clearly. So, what happens now? You live differently. You speak more slowly. You pause before saying yes. You breathe before replying to guilt. You notice who drains you and who lets you rest. You stop asking, will they still like me if I set this boundary, and start asking, do I still like me if I don't? You walk softer but firmer, quieter but more sure. You don't need to announce the new you, just be it. The ones who love you will adjust. The ones who don't were never holding you gently to begin with. Last quote to take with you: when you stop abandoning yourself, you stop attracting those who expect you to. And maybe, just maybe, that's how manipulation ends. Not with a fight, but with a whisper, I am not available for anything that costs me my peace.